Hey friends, my name's Georgie. I'm a breathwork and performance coach, helping people find core confidence through the power of the breath. The warmest of welcomes to the Just Breathe podcast, where I'll be talking all things breathing to help empower you guys to use the power of your breath to harness your bodies and minds. I am so excited for you guys to listen in on today's conversation. It was such a privilege to speak to Dr. Cristina Fraval. What a powerhouse of a woman with such a wealth of knowledge across so many different disciplines. Dr. Cristina is an osteopath, myofunctional therapist, and breathwork practitioner, having been practicing for the last 20 years. And through her work as an osteopath, she started to notice more and more breathing issues as part of the clinical picture. And that gave her a real impetus to further her knowledge and study Buteyko-based breathing as well as OMT, that's orofacial myofunctional therapy. Quite a mouthful there. But Dr. Cristina has the most amazing insights about the interconnectedness of the body, breath, mind, nervous system, you name it, amongst both adults and children. We got talking about the effects of stress on the body, the importance of play in children, how to address issues with children, be that breathing, be that physical, how to go about dealing with something like we have all been facing over the last 2 years. Christina's knowledge was so inspiring, and the way she has connected all of those incredible techniques to really inspire people that everybody has the ability to heal from within given the right environment. Christina has such a belief in the self-healing mechanism, which is constantly striving for optimal health. It was such a beautiful conversation, and I really hope you enjoy it. A little bit of housekeeping. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Just Breathe podcast. Let's keep on building that strong breathing community. The more people becoming empowered by the breath, even becoming aware of the breath and becoming inspired, the better. All right, let's crack right on with today's powerful conversation. I really hope you enjoy it. This is episode 54 of Just Breathe with Dr. Cristina Fraval. Hey, Christina, how's it going?
Hi, Georgie. Really well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. We are on two ends of the globe, right?
That's right. Very far away.
Oh, so Christina, just before we started recording, we're talking about Christina's in Melbourne in the blazing hot summer, and I'm here 7 a.m. in winter, but you know, the sun will come around again. Thank you. Right. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I'd kind of love to dive right in, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Hear a little bit about your journey. I was reading about you, of course, before the episode and things, and just your variety of people. I'm sure as an osteo, you know, many osteos work with such a variety of people, but with children, you know, with women, with lots of different, you know, speciality things. I'm very interested to what your first steps were into osteopathy in the first place. What led you to that?
Yeah, sure. So I had quite a few health issues myself growing up as a teenager. I had some injuries. And my parents took me to some osteopaths. I was very fascinated with how they worked, and I think that sparked a bit of an interest in healthcare for me. And so as I progressed through school, I had an idea that I definitely wanted to do something in the healthcare field. And then I did some sort of placements with osteopaths, and they sort of became my mentors and were very inspiring. So it sort of stemmed from injuries of my own, really. And then I moved interstate to work with the fantastic pediatric osteopath. He was amazing. And his name's Maxwell Fraval. He taught me a huge amount about treating babies and children in the sort of pediatric world, and I've sort of never looked back. But it very much stemmed from my own experiences in healthcare and in trauma and injuries. And just, I thought I'd touch on briefly also, I had a nose injury which stopped me from breathing through my nose because they had to tape the whole thing up, and I was in hospital and I had to become a mouth breather through that process. And afterwards, luckily, my parents, and I actually remember waking up in the night sort of choking because I was trying to breathe through my nose, but because it was all taped up, I had to sort of change my breathing pattern. And my parents, who, I mean, they were great, they actually somehow knew a bit about Buteyko breathing. And this is when I was a teenager, so it's quite a long time ago now. But they took me to see a Buteyko breathing practitioner, and I had some training way back then to help me reestablish my nasal breathing, despite all the injuries to the cartilage and stuff that had happened to my nose. And that sort of also, I think, piqued my interest in breathing. So even though I became an osteopath, I've been practicing for a bit over 20 years now, but I always knew that I'd come to some breath work eventually. I was very interested in the work way back then and some of the exercises that I had to do back then. So it's sort of, and so here I am now working with the breath, working with children, lots of adults as well, though. It's certainly not just children, but so that's sort of where my journey has sort of taken me.
100%. Wow. And there's so many things I want to ask you about from that. But firstly, just for people listening, it did occur to me to actually just very briefly summarize what osteopathy actually is for anyone that is sort of listening and is kind of switching off because they hear the word osteopath and think, oh, don't know one, never seen one, not sure. So what actually is osteopathy?
So osteopathy it's essentially, the philosophy is based around the body being a single, it's a single, we sort of view it as a single unit of function. So everything is interconnected and interrelated, which, you know, in this day and age, obviously more and more we see how everything is connected and that we are one being and not separate parts. So it's, but the man who sort of developed osteopathy, which was sort of the early 1800s, he sort of, one of the key principles is that the body is a single unit of function and that everything is interconnected and related. So when we're working with the body, if there's a shoulder injury, we'll look at the shoulder, but we'll look at the neck, we'll look at the spine, we'll look at the lymphatic drainage, the vascular supply, all the parts that could be affecting it. So it's very much about how the whole system is working together. So often people who have had a car accident and had like a whiplash injury, for example, often it's really important to treat the pelvis as well as the neck because of the membranes that surround the spinal cord can go under a lot of stress when there's been a trauma. The pelvis can get really jammed up, and if you don't treat that as well as the neck, then the pattern can keep coming back, sort of thing. So it's a very sort of holistic view on the body. So that's just in very, very sort of simple terms. But I've also done a lot of work in what's called cranial osteopathy, which is, I suppose, sort of like a branch of osteopathy where we work on the inherent motion of the body, which is called the craniosacral rhythmic impulse, where there's a micro motion that occurs between the cranial bones and the membranes of the head, and also in the sacrum. It's actually throughout the whole body, but you can feel it quite strongly there. So that type of cranial osteopathy, it's a more postgraduate work, but it can be fantastic in resolving a whole range of things, but it can work really well in the pediatric field with relation to birth trauma and forceps delivery and breastfeeding problems, a whole sort of cohort of things. But yeah, so that's sort of osteopathy and the osteopathy that I do, I guess. Hopefully that sort of gives you a bit of a picture.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, there is actually so much hope in the fact that was realized. Of course, you know, if we talk in yogic terms, the mind-body connection to yoke, to unite, has been realized for thousands of years. But in terms of
I maybe in my mind, maybe I'm wrong, have osteopathy in my mind as sort of still modern holistic medicine, yes. But how wonderful that that was developed as early as the 1800s. That's amazing. And, you know, it is without a doubt. I just saw a fantastic post from the Huberman Lab. It's one of my favorite podcasts, all about, he had all the different emotions with sort of some sort of thermo kind of assessor on the body, or some thermal camera on the body. And it was, you know, love was everything was just pure heat throughout the whole body, and sort of envy was very much just heat in the mind and very cold. And it was so the different, it's so fascinating with the changing things. And, you know, when we really look to the modern medicine that everyone assumes to think about today, we think about, you know, if you hurt your bones, you go to the bone guy, and if you have a lung problem, you go to the lung man, and you know, very simple terms, but you'll be given a pill for that one thing to either mask the symptom or ease the pain, and then maybe you'll be given a pill for the symptom of that pill, and then etc., 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 when actually you're never identifying even the root cause. So it really sounds like osteopathy is there to find the root. Is there quite an investigative kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, very much. Yeah. So there is, very much about peeling back the layers to the coming back to that whole body as a single unit of function, and that unless everything is in when I say alignment, functional alignment, it doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical. It's more sort of functional balance, if you like. Then health will express itself within the body. So it's very much trying to tap into the body's innate healing mechanism, which A.T. Still, the founder, very much tried to, make us understand that, the body has this self-healing capacity, and we're just there to support it, that the intelligence of the body is divine, sort of thing. And that's what's so beautiful, and I think which drew me to osteopathy as well. It's that respect for the human body, and as you say, all the connections and mind, body, spirit, heart, all those things are so much part of it. And all those things are expressed in the body. If there is a trauma, obviously there's the physical trauma, but there's so many other layers to that trauma that osteopathy can in many ways help, and often things are expressed. If you support the body in the right way, then those emotions can be released. The trauma of the tissues can be unwound. The psychology that has been, come. So there's this real sense of trying to really support the whole body, not just the physical body as well, which is quite beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, such a large percentage of our system is water. And I think a lot of us forget that we are actually flowing, and even if we go deeper into like subatomic, we are electrical beings. And how on earth could that ever be compartmentalized to not be connected? I have no idea. But yeah, that is really, really beautiful. And with the breathing, with your journey, you basically did the James Nestor experiment that he did from his book Breath, where he was on a bike. Blocked his nose and fought way before James Nestor did. I'm glad we're recording this. I hope James listened. No, I'm joking. But you were the first, I'm sure, but not by choice.
Not by choice, no.
But yeah, that's and obviously there's a lot of information out there. And for anyone that doesn't know, of course, your nose is so important to moisture and filter the air, and for efficient breathing. You can get up to 20% more oxygen delivered to tissues, muscles, cells breathing through your nose. And if you don't use it, you lose it. That's the thing. Did you experience a lot of congestion at that time when you couldn't?
Oh yeah, so after that I had bouts of tonsillitis and a cohort of things, definitely that as part of that problem. And the Buteyko breathing really helped. But then I was a teenager, and, you know, I did some of the stuff and then it lapsed. And I think for a period I became a bit of some nasal breathing, some mouth breathing. And then it wasn't until later on when I started to, you know, delve more into it, I made the connection of, you know, some really serious stuff that I had going on health-wise, with particularly tonsillitis and, you know, a range of other things. But that I realised, you know, it's so important. I really need to hone back into the breath, come back to that. And that, you know, through the training and the work that I did with some of the Buteyko breathing practitioners here in Australia, that's really, really helped, obviously, and it's changed my life, really, definitely. That, and I've been able to help so many people and really amplify my practice, you know, because obviously the musculoskeletal stuff, you know, and working with, you know, a huge variety of clients is wonderful, but being able to add this extra breathing sort of education it's been wonderful, really, because I'm seeing more and more kids who are breathing with their mouth. You know, it's becoming more common, and then there's dental issues that go with that, and then there's, you know, teeth grinding that goes with that. So, you know, I've got lots of parents bringing kids in with, you know, like my child's, you know, 3 years old and he's grinding his teeth. Why is he grinding his teeth, sort of thing? So and then, you know, breathing through his mouth, snoring, all those things, sort of. So it's been wonderful to not just work on the musculoskeletal cranial side of things, but to be able to incorporate the breathing and educate parents on the importance of nasal breathing at such a young age, because it will just change how their whole system develops, how their face grows, how their spine develops, how their posture develops, you know, their whole digestive system, everything. So it's wonderful to be able to sort of incorporate that now. So, and that's what I've been doing more of in the last 5 years. But I've got 3 children of my own, so it's mixed in with all of that. And one of my children, he's had a lot of these problems, so I've learned a lot through the journey with him as well, which has been always a challenge with your own kids, you know, but it's been fantastic. He's been wonderful, and he just keeps going. And poor Noah, he's always the one that gets this and has to have the plate and has to do the breathing exercises and has to, you know, but he's tough. He's got a will of iron, so, and he's going to be much better for it. But I've learned a lot through, you know, working because of his experiences as well from sort of when he was younger. So yeah.
Oh, little Noah. I literally love that name. It's beautiful. But yeah, you know, I mean, he will be a very grateful adult for it, I'm sure. Do you find a lot of, obviously you've even said how much the breath does affect the physical body, and vice versa, that it is not kind of body breath or body mind? It could be, no, if you have a lot of tension in the body, or please, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, if you have a lot of tension in the body, the breathing is disrupted. But if the breathing is disrupted, it may cause tension in the body.
Of course. Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Etc. Sort of following that, I'd love to touch on and I'm asking this to a lot of people I'm speaking to on the podcast, stress, which is a loaded word, I know. But considering the last 2 years and what people have been through, and I'm even thinking actually a lot about those children that have only seen most people in a mask outside of their own homes, that have grown up knowing lockdowns, you know, vigorous vaccine programs, etc., as the norm. You know, and that's got to have an impact. Am I going to school? Am I not? Am I going to see my friends? Am I not?
Absolutely.
Things that we, you know, completely took for granted when we were young, I'm sure has put a lot of stress on both children and parents, and has caused a lot of problems to rise to the surface. I mean, that actually just came out, but is that something you notice actually? Can stress be a trigger for underlying problems to rise more? Or do you find it is something that goes on and on and on and on until it's just too much? And then, like you said, the body needs to come back to homeostasis. And so it will start to take it more into its own hands to heal itself, because it's almost like, whoa, this is too much.
Yeah. I think the thing with, stress, as you say, being a loaded word, there's so many different forms of it. I was thinking about this earlier, and because obviously you've got stress maybe from a past incident and, trauma, you've got daily stress. There might be underlying chronic stress where you're just living in, not extreme stress, but it's just constantly there. Your mind is always racing. You're racing from one thing, it's just this, you're never sort of fully coming back to, your true being. I would say you're sort of always out there rather than coming back into yourself. So there's those types of stresses. I was thinking, so there can be layers. There can be, and when I treat people, and when I work with them osteopathically and with the cranial treatment, often if there's been a past trauma, whether, like, for example, a physical trauma, an accident, car accident, or knee injury, for example, when I work on the knee or the hip or whatever, there's definitely a release of stress in the tissues. You can really feel a softening and a lengthening and an increase in blood supply to the area and a warmth. But it's really interesting because sometimes patients that memories that are associated with that trauma come back to them. Like, I've had patients who then, and I believe they're releasing that stress, like they've almost forgotten it, but then it comes to them, and often they'll just verbalize it, go, and just something comes out, and they don't even know where it's come from. But I think it's related to that idea of, cellular memory, tissue memory, and there's stress or emotional stress, physical stress. It's all been stored in the system, and then that releases. And then often with that, there is a breath response as well. There's this calming of the diaphragm, their breathing changes. You can really see this. It's like their autonomic nervous system kicks in, and their system sort of drops into that more relaxed rest, restore state of being. So I'm not sure if I fully answered your question there.
Yeah, no, I know it's a loaded word. And I think when I say the word stress, anyone in any kind of, high medical field kind of goes, because it's like, do you want the podcast to be 4 hours long? Because it's such a loaded word, but also I think it is something that is also so still under-recognized as
absolutely
maybe the biggest cause of these cause unknown for autoimmune diseases, etc. Is the cause really unknown, or do we all really kind of know what's the cause?
Yeah, well, that's right. It's true. And certainly even more so with the last 2 years that we've had with this. And I have seen that. I mean, I've seen it with a lot of the kids that I've been treating. And obviously it totally depends on how the parents have responded to the stress of COVID. And you've got those that, have been hyper vigilant with hand washing, mask wearing, excessive sort of don't touch that, don't touch them, we can't see them, we can't do that. And, obviously growing up in that, and I've, kids then, and so much more, I've seen it with kids, their whole nervous system is in this heightened sort of state of constant sort of agitation. And when I treat them, I can feel it. It's like their whole nervous system is sort of buzzing, but not in a positive way, if that makes sense. It's sort of not able to fully relax. And the cranial work, the cranial treatment, and obviously some of the breathing as well, work can really help bring that back down. But often these kids are showing unusual symptoms, like unusual, eye sort of, or sometimes tics, I guess, or sort of not like a full-blown tic, but a hint of that, unusual things that, that their parents have never seen them do before. And they've gone and seen this specialist and this specialist and this specialist, and nothing has shown up, sort of thing. But I feel like it's because of, the environment it's their body's way of trying to express this agitation or stress in their nervous system. And obviously the breathing and the cranial osteopathy, particularly with these kids, can be of real benefit. And it's wonderful when, with time and just a bit of work and treatment, it just resolves itself. And they didn't have to take any medicine. They didn't have to, and just through, guiding the parents a bit. But then on the other side of the coin, you've got parents who, have been totally, almost don't even believe in any virus. And so they've, removed themselves as much as possible. They're homeschooling, they're So those children haven't experienced anything like that. So, you've got these two sides of the coin, and unfortunately a huge division in which, has created all sorts of problems in the schools. We've had it in our school as well. And no matter what your belief or choice, there should always be a place for diversity and difference of opinion and comparison, and that's how we find our way through life, and love. There should be that love, support, no matter what. And hopefully that will come once we sort of make our way through all this. But and I still feel there will be some good that comes through from this trauma and stress that we have all had to experience. There is something about the whole world going through something together, and in the past we wouldn't even think about half of these countries, and then all of a sudden we're all sort of experiencing something together, and there must be something in that, this global consciousness sort of thing, that is quite powerful. So time will tell, but I'm still trying to be positive about the whole thing.
Yeah, and it's the best way to be, to see it as something of unity that does sort of evoke the diversity that exists in the world, but also reflects that we are all just human beings, and we're all capable of going through the same thing. And that, that's why I love breath. Breath is the most universal language on the planet. But I do want to touch on that, you talked about these children coming in with a buzzing nervous system, and the word dysautonomia has come up a lot with some people. Even I've been seeing with one-to-one breath work, where the autonomic nervous system is essentially not functioning, is what I mean by dysautonomia.
Yes.
Not functioning properly.
Yes.
But in a child, or in anyone, it just goes without saying, I suppose, that you really cannot access that creative, playful, open state for children to be in their full breadth of that beautiful imagination they have. They need to be in a more parasympathetic dominant state, if I'm not mistaken. And even an adult, there's a wonderful study really about how we cannot be truly focused, and a lot of people researching the flow state now. We can't be in a true state of focused calm unless we are in a more parasympathetic state. Of course, both sides, both branches are always working of the autonomic nervous system. It's, a lot of people think it's either or, but it's actually which one is dominant, right? So in terms of kind of play with children, I know this is something I really wanted to touch on, and that curiosity. When I was little, I remember, like, oh my goodness, I had so many incidents. I fell out of a tree. I turned a kayak upside down and got stuck in it. I so many, got rescued by a lifeguard, loads of things. But when you're saying all that stuff, that, don't touch this, don't touch that, or don't, and the bit is the connection with other people, right?
Yes,
the don't go near that person, don't, and children, even, like, interesting how you said with the tissues that they absorb experiences, or absorb, maybe is more accurate, the response to those experiences is they hold on to. With children, isn't that tenfold? Yes, well, they're so open. There's this openness about children that I suppose it's almost this, they come, in my opinion, so open and so sensitive to all things around them, even though some people think babies are sort of oblivious. I sort of feel like it's the opposite. They're so open to everything. And so, yes, they will absorb those things quite strongly, and certainly you can feel that in the body when you work with it. Absolutely. When you put your hands on, and when you've been, working with the body for such a long time, I mean, you can even feel it when they enter the room. It's palpable, that stress that, is
sometimes coming from the parent, sometimes you can immediately see it in the child as well, depending on the age, sort of thing. But yes, I would agree that if they're not able to be in that more dominant parasympathetic state, then they are shutting down those natural sort of play mentality. And I mean, it's interesting that you brought up play, because I grew up in a Steiner school. I don't know if you've heard of Steiner education.
I have.
And so my parents and my parents both worked at the Steiner school down the track. They were both teachers there, and now my children are at the same Steiner school, and there's a huge focus on play-based learning and how important that is. And I grew up without a television. Like, we didn't even have a television, and my children have, you know, had very minimal. We actually just bought a television last year, so my eldest is now 11. So the same similar sort of thing. We've really tried to, you know, decrease that. I mean, they do see stuff, of course. It's the modern age, but I really feel like that's a huge impact, obviously, and that's a whole nother conversation. But to be able to really be open and to, you know, access that your true being, and to find what your path is in this world, and to find that real creativity, you need that openness and not that shutting down of your nervous system, of your, you know, being thrown into that fight flight, because that's just survival. So you're only going to be in this survival. You can't go to any deeper layer of sort of creativity or exploration. I mean, that's why it's so important that kids get bored as well. You know, they need that open space to just wander and not have something, you know, fired at them. So, and you see it when kids do have that openness, how, you know, after a period of time, they just start to develop and create and do things and fall into this, and they go almost into a different world. It's so beautiful to see, and it's almost dreamlike. And I've seen it with particularly my youngest, who's 7, you know, in the garden, and he'll be out there for ages just exploring the way the water runs from the tap, you know, down in his little water track. And you can see his mind is just creating so many different ways of making it move. And I feel like that's so important for, you know, deep inner strength and growth that will help him, you know, later in life to sort of know who he truly is and what his path is, sort of thing. Whereas if kids don't have that space and ability to, you know, fall into that gentle, more dominant parasympathetic state, then yeah, it's much harder for them to focus, you know, exist, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean, does that sort of answer? Yeah.
That little boy, you know, might turn into a 30-year-old who changes the world with the way we see water, you know.
That's right.
That is just so beautiful. I am really moved by that. I love hearing about just children being allowed to be freaking children, you know. Yes. Like, it's not I really, you know, I hope I get the opportunity to be a mother one day, and not just yet, just 26, not but, you know, that one day, you know, I can teach my children that life isn't so serious. It doesn't need to be. It's
absolutely
fun. It's fun. I mean, when you work with kids that do have an issue, and you know, you need to, of course, engage them for whatever treatment or whatever, I guess treatment is the right word, whatever you are doing with them for it to be effective. And so what do you turn it into? One big game? Do you use
there is definitely a lot of games, but there's, I suppose, stories are great, and I've done this a lot with my own children as well. I would say the stories are very, very powerful. So I suppose that is a game. If you're wanting them to do a certain thing, you have to be very happy to make a fool of yourself and come back to your inner child and sort of really fool around and make it fun. It's all about making it fun, absolutely. And certainly having the parents involved is actually really great. Usually they're really fantastic as well. I mean, and with over time, you can build that rapport with a child and you know, really make that connection through experience. But it's so exciting when you do, and they get really excited to come and spend time with you, and you know, you play games, but it's same thing, it's bringing them into that really comfortable space once again. And it's amazing how trauma works, because there was one little girl who, the medical practice that I work at, she'd seen another practitioner, I think it was about 5 years before, I think for a vaccination, and which was a real trauma. Like the mother said, it was just horrendous. So she was coming back this first time to see me for an osteopathic treatment, and we were going to do some breathing work with her. A dentist had referred her to me to do some breathing work because she had a lot of sinus congestion, and but she wouldn't even come into the clinic because she had that memory from that sort of trauma. And I said, that's fine, I'll come out, and we did some work and stuff outside. But it was and we managed to get her to a point where she would come into the clinic, but still there was this, she barely wanted me to even like put my hands on her. So it was where we just did some exercises and stuff, and that was okay. But I actually ended up referring her to one of my colleagues, because the trauma of her coming to that place each time, it was just too much, sort of thing. So it's amazing that was literally about 5 years before, and she still had that memory. So I think she was 5 when she was going to get this, when she got this vaccination done, and then 5 years later, when she was about 11, to come and see me. And that, so you know, that cellular memory, that tissue memory, that trauma that children can hold, obviously is, you know, really quite powerful, and they hold it physically, so much physically in their bodies, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I had the privilege to have my first little client. Of course, you know, I for anyone that doesn't know, and I'm sure it'll be in the intro that I record later, that I work with the oxygen advantage method, which is based on the Buteyko method. So this is a beautiful connection here. And with this little girl, same, she had some sinus issues and was kind of mouth breathing, and had been referred to do some breathwork by a dentist, which is great. There's such a connection with dentists now. That's fantastic. Yeah. That you know, and we played a game where I locked my lips. I said, she loved fairies, said this is a very magic key, and we locked the lip. And now apparently at home she gives her mum the key, and they lock it, and she can't leave school without locking our lips. It's very important. And just so, because I told her the only way we can make magic fairy dust is through our nose. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't happen through the mouth, and it's true to a degree. You know, I still believe that. Yes, that's right. But it's so much fun. Children are so open, and actually to a degree a lot more responsive than adults, because they don't have these contraindications to think, well, actually, but I learned this previously, and that kind of that you can see it in their eyes that they're thinking. But and you're like, my answer always to anyone with breathwork, and to anyone listening that hasn't tried breathwork yet, is try it. Because your physiology is individual. I can't tell you if it's going to work for you or not, but I can hold space and give you something to try that, you know, will hopefully make a good impact. But if it doesn't, we try something else. And it's that. But, you know, coming back to children, I mean, the fact that you're able to work with them in such a beautifully holistic way, I think is so, so important. You know, there must be so many people out there, even parents listening to this, that are thinking, oh, I wish, you know, I hope I can find someone that could help my kids in that way, that perhaps they've seen are exhibiting behaviors that are out of the ordinary, or are, I think there's nothing more disturbing for any adult actually to see a child in discomfort. It's very unsettling when you're not, especially if they have a cold, it's sort of okay, because you're like, oh, they have a cold, fine, it'll last this many days and then it'll get better. Yeah. But if there's a child and you know in your gut that And I mean, I was just going to say earlier, we've been saying for how long, you know, all these phrases in our vocabulary about you broke my heart, I just have this gut feeling, or I feel sick to the stomach by that thing you just said, or or, you know, you've blown my mind. All of these things that come into our vocabulary unconsciously, we know that there's a mind-body connection, but anyway. And I do want to finish out, because I know I don't want to take too much of your time, but in terms of these parents, and I'm going to be very careful with this, because of course, no one is ever here to tell a parent how to parent. But if parents that are sat here listening to this thinking, oh my goodness, they're really resonating with what Dr. Cristina is saying, what advice would you give to a parent right now that is struggling in terms of making their children feel safe, or making their children feel that they can play in a world that looks quite different than it did 2 years ago? And I don't know if that's a loaded question, but is there something that, you know, that even if it's you know, a breathing game, or even just something simpler than that, like going for walks or anything, is there a solid piece of advice that, you know, that works? And there may not be an answer to this, but I'm just intrigued.
Look, it's obviously going to be totally individual to, you know, each child, but I suppose generally, I mean, love is the biggest thing, isn't it? It all comes back to love. So love them however they are, whatever they are. And I suppose one of the other big things is everything will pass. That's the other thing. So if there is something that's coming up and you're trying to find this out, or what is this, what's going on, there's a place for that. But then sometimes if you hone in on something too much, you're giving it almost more energy that it needs. So if there's something negative happening and you're, you know, how can we fix it? How can we do this? How can we, you know, really focus? It's almost like you're feeding into what's happening. Whereas if you just let it be and sort of trust that there's other things happening around you, within you, whatever your beliefs, then and if you don't feed into it too much, often things will sort themselves out and fall into place. Like, so try to find the ease, not go into the, you know, I have to find out what's going on with this. Why is this child doing this? Why can't he do this? And I've had that with parents, you know, they become quite obsessive about one particular thing. And I feel like the more that they hone in on it, the more it amplifies what the child is doing almost. And it's almost, because they're getting more of a reaction, it's like, it's almost this, you know, back and forth. Whereas almost if you not totally ignore it, but sort of just let it go and try and find the ease through it, then often the answer comes. It's like, oh, look, that's reduced, or this person just comes up and says, oh, I might be able to help with that. And you're like, oh, wow, you know, it's sort of, so I mean, that's a bit of a weird answer. But,
no, that is beautiful. I mean, it was a weird question, but it was one that I think is sort of a question that a lot of people wouldn't want to ask. So then on things like this, it is kind of, at least for someone to say, yeah, but what, you know, if you had to give advice, what would it be? But, you know, something that occurred to me then is that I suppose we were talking about how children are so open and absorb experiences so readily that perhaps maybe it's actually talking about children, maybe it's more of an invitation for the parents to do the work on themselves to make sure that they feel in a state of homeostasis and somewhat balance in difficult circumstances, in a difficult environment, to say, you know, well, maybe the focus even isn't on the child, you know what I mean? But in the it probably would help the children massively in this sense if the parent is in a stable place, because surely that's all a child wants, is for their person that they count on to be whole. And that goes for, I guess, anything in life. You can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Absolutely. You know, that's a very, very good point. I think you're spot on there. And very much that's that whole idea of, you know, you can't change others, but if you change yourself or work on yourself and just be the example, people just naturally shift around you. It's just that the energy that you express really influences those around you. So that's exactly right. And as a parent, even more so. So if you're able to manage yourself, your children often will just sort themselves out sort of thing. Things will work themselves out. So yeah. That's a very good point. Yeah.
And by self-management, of course, we're not talking about, you know, anything huge like people sitting there thinking, oh, I need to see a psychiatrist. It's
not at all.
No, you know, couple integrating, for example, while we're talking about it, couple simple breathing techniques in the day, it can be a absolute godsend.
A huge change. That's right.
Yeah.
Or 10 minutes of breathing, or as you say, like and it only needs to be a small amount of time, but just finding that space where you're not being bombarded by screens, people calling you, phones, whatever it might be, and to come back to your being, your inner self. Just those 10 minutes, it can be life-changing, as you say. And that's where the breath, obviously, you know, that brings you right back to that place. And that is, you know, massively effective. So as you say, it doesn't need to be much. Yeah.
What a way to finish out the Just Breathe podcast. Thank you. Thank you so much, Christina.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that was a beautiful, beautiful conversation. And is there anywhere, you know, if someone's like, oh my goodness, I want to work with this woman, you know, in what capacity do you work? Is your work just in person, or do you do online, or what?
Yeah, I do online. Yep. Yeah, I've done quite a lot of presentations online, and I certainly do breath work with people and the orofacial myofunctional therapy stuff online as well. So yeah, absolutely. So the best way is probably to contact me through my website, which is ChristinaFraval.com, and there's a contact information there. So if anyone wants to, of course, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Lovely to chat.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I'll put that website in the show notes, and yeah, I hope we can talk again soon. I feel
I'd love to. Yeah,
I definitely have more questions from your wealth of wisdom. But for now, thank you so much.
No, thank you very much. All right, all the best. Bye now.